Look, after those 39 asylum seekers were discovered in Western Australia late last week, Australian Border Force officials fear that people smugglers are getting ready for a new assault on our coastline. It's believed people smugglers are investing in faster boats and better technology to get people to the mainland undetected. For more on this, I'm joined now by National Editor for The Australian, Dennis Shanahan. Well, I hate to say we're back here on this issue again, Dennis. 39 men we know now are from Pakistan, Bangladesh and India. They told locals they wanted to get to Sydney to work. They wanted to then send the money home to their families. The concern here, of course, is these arrivals as an issue are a massive Achilles heel for Labor. But worse is I don't think there's many voters out there, Dennis, that have got confidence that Labor can manage their way through this. We know patrols are down from where they were last year, and we know that there's also a train wreck on the front bench in the form of Andrew Giles and Claire O'Neill. I think there's a lack of confidence that if this genie gets out of the bottle yet again, that Labor can put it back in.
Well, Peter, this is clearly a growing problem. We've had 2 boats actually now reach the mainland, the first time in a decade on the northwest coast. A large number of people are there. This will only add to the sugar on the table as far as the people smugglers are concerned. There is also a clear line that they are changing their tactics. Interestingly, and people smugglers are a global industry, what's been happening in the United States is that with the increased patrols to stop people coming across the border in Mexico, people are now using fast boats to bring people onto the beaches in California. So we're actually seeing a change in tactics globally, and this is bad news for Australia because we've actually had a decline in the number of aerial surveillance and naval patrols. So ultimately, if there are more people are trying to get to Australia, fewer ways to actually stop them, then it is going to happen. But I think the real danger for Labor here is that these couple of boat arrivals have actually acted as a great symbol on the big problem of immigration, the broader problem of immigration. We've seen for the first time 1 million people come to Australia in a single year. People are feeling the pressure. They feel it as part of the cost of living pressure. People feel squeezed in the major cities, particularly Sydney, by feeling that there are more and more people coming. They feel it just in transport and housing particularly. And so when they see people arriving and saying, we just came here to come to Sydney and get a job, they feel that pressure and it becomes a wider problem, particularly with the release of the detainees. Now, what we've seen is that the detainees, yes, the High Court ordered them to be released. The government has handled the procedure appallingly. And so what we're seeing is a building of the attraction to Australia where people smugglers, who surprisingly actually lie to the people they're taking money from and whose lives they're endangering, to actually get people to come. They've changed their tactics. This is going to be bad for the country and bad for the Labor government.
I call out the Prime Minister, though, today, Dennis. I mean, trying to make it all about Peter Dutton, saying he has no right to speak about this issue. If he continually talks about it in the media, the line from the PM is he's not being bipartisan on boats. He's making it worse. He's giving the people smugglers something to sell. I mean, I think that's outrageous. We need to know about these failures. This is exactly what Rudd and Gillard both tried to do, to shut down Tony Abbott at the time he was opposition leader. And when he got in there, and we were told, and I'm not breaching confidences here, but we were told by officials it was such a closely run thing that we were able to stop the boats that time with a whole new Operation Sovereign Borders. And they said to us, we feared that if we couldn't stop them now, we would never be able to stop them. They know what's happening around the world. We can see what's happening in places like Italy and the UK. And Australia, I have to say, I mean, this is a huge warning tonight, are on the tipping point yet again.
Well, that's right, Peter. And I interviewed Kevin Rudd just before the 2007 election and asked him, would he turn boats back? And he said yes. After the election, he didn't. And this is the problem for Labor. The public are very suspicious of Labor and very suspicious of Anthony Albanese and certainly Andrew Giles when they say they're going to do, the top priority is to protect the Australian community.
What about that stunt from the Prime Minister today? I mean, you know, first of all, that thing on Friday, I played it there where he sort of says, oh, well, I was in the car. I don't know about this boat arrival. I mean, that is just a joke, right? That's a weak tactical game. I think he's come off worse about that than trying to hide from the truth. But then today, you know, this question he gets about the GST, do you guarantee WA's share of the GST? He has this sort of play game with the journalist, comes over on Texter, signs a pledge on the journalist's arm. Well, we find out the journalist is a former, you know, senior Labor staffer. He's now back working in the media. But this is the stuff that just doesn't fly.
Well, no, and I have to say, I actually admire Anthony Albanese's brazenness. He's got more brass than a brass monkey. He actually just goes out and says things like, I'm sorry, I was in the car, and we're all expected to believe this. He's also referred to the fact, there were boat arrivals under Peter Dutton. There were people wandering along the beaches in Queensland as if they'd arrived on the Gold Coast. One small boat arrived on the tip of Cape York from New Guinea. It is just amazing what he will do. The stunts. Well, the other thing is this underlines this stunt with the journalist. I think probably a bad look for the journalist, particularly since he's a former Labor staffer. But look, you know, what they were actually saying was, oh, well, Prime Minister, we don't believe you about the WA GST deal. And he had to then write it on the journalist's arm to prove that. And then he suggested he get a tattoo. Well, you know, I think that this is, it also illustrates the fact he wasn't talking about the tax cuts. He was talking about the WA GST and the fact that the WA government or people weren't believing a decision that had already been taken on the WA GST deal. And while it's bad policy, it's bipartisan, it's going to happen, and yet he had to write it out to convince people that it wasn't going to change.
But that's what happens, Dennis, when you start fibbing and backtracking as he did on the stage 3 tax cuts. You know, he said it 100 times. Imagine if you, Dennis Shanahan, had started putting tattoos all the way down your arm every time he said he wasn't going to touch those stage 3 tax cuts. If that's the measure, you should have a whole arm of bad ink there. And this is the problem he's got. They don't believe him on boats. His words sound hollow. Look at Labor's old record. They don't believe him now on these tax cuts, or in this case, the GST pledge, because he has proven to be a guy who can do a backflip like a gymnast. That's the difficulty he's got. And we've got Dunkley coming up. We'll see where things are on the 2nd of March. I know Labor are trying to sell it in that this is a test for Dutton if they don't win the seat. It's a 6%er. And I might add, the incumbent Labor MP was very popular. She died in office. I suspect there's some level of a sympathy vote. How are you reading this one?
Oh, look, I think it'd be very tough for the Liberals to take this from the government. If they do, it will be an absolute disaster for Anthony Albanese. It would mean that he spent all of this money on tax cuts for so far being able to tread water after going backwards last year. So he's just treading water. If he can't hold Dunkley, it will be a disaster for him. But I think the real measure is going to be the extent of the swing against the government. I really think it's highly unlikely the Liberals will win, but I think we need to measure it against the swing. And yes, there was a very popular member who died, and this doesn't have the normal anger towards the departure of an MP or an unnecessary by-election. I think Labor should hold it, but I think they will suffer a swing.
Yeah, just for people at home, 2 times recently the seat of Aston and also the seat of Canning, both government-held seats. The MP died in office. They were both retained by the government. Dennis, thank you. Great to have you as always. Just so you know too, the Dunkley by-election pre-polling opened today in Melbourne.